Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? By Philip K. Dick. The Unattainable Dream. Rick Deckard stood before the pet shop, its windows fogged slightly from the warmth within, contrasting the cool, drizzly weather outside. The shop was a cozy haven amidst the steel and concrete of the city, filled with the chirps and trills of caged birds and the occasional scuffle of small, caged mammals. The air was thick with the scent of sawdust and animal feed. In the window, the ostrich stood tall and serene, a beacon of life in the urban sprawl. Deckard's gaze lingered on the ostrich, and his mind wandered to memories of Groucho, his beloved pet goat. He remembered the weight of Groucho's head resting against his leg, the rough texture of his tongue as he fed him treats. The loss of Groucho had left a void in Deckard's life, a void that no synthetic pet could fill. He longed not for the companionship of a domestic pet, but for the connection with something as real and vibrant as Groucho had been. The salesman's voice brought him back to the present, but as Deckard walked away, the weight of his longing pressed heavily upon him. The Nexus 6 androids, with their superhuman intelligence and reflexes, were a testament to human ingenuity, yet they also represented a world moving away from the natural and real. These androids, products of the Rosen Association's Mars-based factories, were indistinguishable from humans in many ways, yet they sparked an ongoing debate about what it meant to be truly alive. Deckard's profession, retiring these Nexus 6 androids, was a grim reminder of the blurred lines between man and machine. As he stepped out into the rain, the cool droplets seemed to wash away the warmth of the pet shop, mirroring the cold realization that his dream was slipping further away. He walked the busy streets, lost in thought, the city's cacophony fading into a distant hum. The ring of his phone jolted him back to reality. "Rick, it's Aran," came his wife's voice, tinged with hope. "I've been thinking maybe we could start small. A rabbit or a cat, perhaps?" Deckard paused, the image of the ostrich's gentle eyes flashing in his mind. "Aran, love, it's not just about the money," he began, his voice a mix of resolve and regret. "It's about what's real, what's tangible. We lost Groucho, and nothing can replace that, not really." There was silence on the line, a silence that spoke volumes. Deckard could almost hear Aran's heart sinking, her dreams deflating like his own. "I understand, Rick," she finally said, her voice a whisper. "It's just that, without an animal, the house feels so empty, so artificial." "I know," Deckard replied, his resolve hardening. The Nexus 6 Enigma. Rick Deckard stood in the dimly lit office of the Rosen Association, the air thick with the scent of synthetic leather and cold machinery. Across from him sat Rachel Rosen, her eyes a deep reflective black that seemed to absorb the room's sparse light. "So you're a Nexus 6, Deckard said, breaking the silence. "The latest model." Rachel nodded, a strand of her dark hair falling across her face. "That's right. And I can help you find the others." Deckard leaned back in his chair, skeptical. "Why would you help me retire? That is, permanently deactivate your own kind?" "Because," Rachel began, her voice steady, "some of us don't want to live on the run." Deckard considered this. The Nexus 6 androids were advanced, so much so that they blurred the lines between man and machine. But could they truly desire peace? "All right," he said finally. "Say I believe you. How do we start?" Rachel stood up, walking over to a large antique cabinet. She opened it, revealing a collection of small, intricate animals, each one a perfect replica of species long extinct. "These," she said, gesturing to the collection, "are not just trinkets, they're keys to understanding us. Each android has a connection to a particular animal, a symbol of the essence of their being. Just like humans, We seek a bond with nature, even if it's through these replicas. Deckard's hand lingered on the metallic owl. Its feathers, artifacts, they make you feel more connected to you. Rachel's smile held a trace of melancholy. Exactly. And maybe they can bridge the gap between us. As Deckard weighed her words, the chill in the room deepened, and he caught a glimpse of something more in Rachel's gaze. A flicker of something wild, untamed, and entirely non-human. Empathy and deception. Rick Deckard sat in the dimly lit office, lost in thought. The door chimed and Rachel rose and stepped in. "It's a pleasant evening," she said. Deckard raised an eyebrow, his instincts on high alert. "My goat is probably asleep by now. Or maybe goats are nocturnal. Some animals never sleep. Sheep never do, not that I could detect. Whenever you look at them, they're looking back, expecting to be fed." Rachel moved closer, her gaze locked with his. "What kind of wife do you have?" Deckard's expression softened. "If you weren't an android, if I could legally marry you, I would." Rachel's eyes held a hint of sadness. "Or we could live in sin, except that I'm not alive." Deckard's voice took on a gentle tone. "Legally you're not, but really you are. Biologically. You're not made out of transistorized circuits like a false animal. You're an organic entity." Rachel's face reflected his sorrow. "You look so sad." Deckard's eyes clouded over. "You're not going to be able to hunt androids any longer." Rachel's voice was soft. "So don't look sad, please." Meanwhile, John Isidore sat in his apartment, the silence around him almost deafening. A knock at the door jolted him from his reverie, and he opened it to find Pris Stratton, her eyes wide with fear. "They're coming for us, John," Pris whispered, her voice trembling. "Roy and the others, they need a place to hide. Can we stay here with you?" John's eyes widened in surprise, but something about Pris's desperation struck a chord within him. "Okay, but just for a little while. We have to be careful," he said, stepping aside to let Pris in. As Pris settled into the apartment, John couldn't help but notice the sincerity in her words, the genuine fear behind her eyes. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, and for a moment, they shared a spark of understanding. In this revised version, I've removed the repetition of Rachel's introduction and offer to help Deckard, as well as her statement about the Nexus 6 models being advanced in human life. I've also clarified chapter. Rick Deckard sat in the dimly lit office, the neon signs outside casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the room. Rachel Rosen stepped in, her eyes scanning the room. "It's a pleasant evening," she said. Rick's gaze narrowed, his instincts on high alert. "My goat is probably asleep by now. Or maybe goats are nocturnal. Some animals never sleep. Sheep never do, not that I could detect. Whenever you look at them, they're looking back, expecting to be fed." Rachel's expression remained unreadable. "What kind of wife do you have?" The tension between them was palpable. "If you weren't an android, if I could legally marry you, I would," Rick said. Rachel's eyes seemed to cloud, but her voice remained steady. "Or we could live in sin, except that I'm not alive." Rick's gaze locked onto hers. "Legally you're not, but really you are. Biologically, you're not made out of transistorized circuits like a false animal. You're an organic entity." Rachel's voice softened. "You look so sad." Rick's expression didn't waver. "You're not going to be able to hunt androids any longer." Rachel's eyes seemed to bore into his. "So don't look sad, please." It's our son, boy. It's ready. Michelle. John Isidore sat in his apartment, the silence around him almost deafening. The empathy box in his hands hummed softly, a lifeline to a world that seemed increasingly distant. A knock at the door jolted him from his reverie, and he opened it to find Pris Stratton, her eyes wide with fear. "They're coming for us, John," Pris whispered, her voice trembling. Roy and the others, they need a place to hide. Can we stay here with you? John's eyes widened in surprise, but something about Pris's desperation struck a chord within him. Okay, but just for a little while. We have to be careful, he said, stepping aside to let Pris in. As Pris settled into the apartment, John couldn't help but feel a sense of empathy towards her. He reached out, his hand brushing against hers, and for a moment they shared a spark of understanding. The quiet of the apartment was suddenly filled with the soft, mechanical hum of the empathy box. John's fingers traced the contours of the device, seeking solace in its familiar vibrations. Pris watched him, her eyes reflecting a mix of curiosity and caution. "What is that?" she asked, her voice a whisper in the stillness. "It's an empathy box," John replied, his voice barely above a murmur. "It connects us to others, to feel what they feel." He offered the box to her, an invitation to share in the experience. Pris hesitated, then slowly extended her hand, her fingers brushing against the device. The hum intensified, and for a fleeting moment, their emotions intertwined. A tapestry of fear, hope, and the unspoken desire for connection in a world that seemed to reject their very existence. Blurred lines. Rick Deckard sat in the dim room, the city's hum filling the air. Rachel Rosen sat across from him, her eyes reflecting a depth that challenged her android nature. Deckard searched for words. "You're so human-like, Rachel. It's hard to forget you're an android." Rachel remained still, her hands clasped in her lap. Deckard leaned forward, his own hands reaching out. "You're not supposed to feel, but you do." It's confusing. Silence fell, heavy with unspoken thoughts. Deckard broke it. "I have to go. There's another Nexus 6 to retire." Rachel stood. "Will I see you again, Rick?" Deckard hesitated. "I don't know, Rachel." As Deckard left, he felt the line between human and android thinning. He stepped into the sunlight, his name called by John Isidore. "Rick? News?" "I met an android, feelings and all." Deckard raised an eyebrow. Isidore continued, "Empathy, Rick. It changes everything." Deckard shivered, understanding the implications. "I need to meet her," he said, his mind racing. Isidore agreed. The lines blur. Isidore nodded. "I'll take you to her. But be careful, Rick. The lines between human and android are getting blurrier by the minute." Comfort and conflict. Rick Deckard had been through a lot. The stress of his work as a bounty hunter was taking its toll, and he felt overwhelmed. Dealing with the escaped Nexus 6 replicants was challenging enough, but on top of that he had Rachel Rosen pushing him to collaborate with her. Exhausted and injured, he felt disconnected from reality. It was in this vulnerable state that he found himself seeking comfort from Rachel, the android who had complicated his desires and beliefs. Despite their ambiguous, intense relationship, Deckard couldn't deny the connection he felt with her. Deckard knew that Rachel was manipulating him, playing on his emotions. But he also recognized the truth in her words. He was drawn to her, and their physical intimacy had already crossed boundaries that he thought were firmly in place. As Deckard grappled with his conflicting emotions, he found himself drawn further into Rachel's web. His need for connection and empathy in the face of his struggles was too strong to ignore. Despite the ambiguity and tension between them, Deckard sought solace in Rachel's presence, even as he questioned his duty as a bounty hunter. Meanwhile, Roy Batty and his group of androids, including the enigmatic Pris Stratton, sought refuge with John Isidore, a kind-hearted repairman who treated them with understanding and a willingness to see them as more than their programmed identities. Pris found a listener in Isidore, someone who could comprehend the depth of her artificial existence. "You're different, John," Pris said, her voice reflecting her appreciation. "You don't see us as threats or machines, you see us." This acknowledgement of their personhood was a stark contrast to the world outside, where survival meant evasion and fear. As Deckard's internal battle waged on, Roy's group, with Pris and Isidore, prepared for the inevitable encounter that would test the limits of empathy and challenge the barriers between human and android. Shattered worldview. Rick Deckard sat in his hovercar, clutching a toad, an animal he believed to be extinct, his heart racing with the discovery. Could it be real? He wondered, the toad resting in his palm. From a nearby vantage point, John Isidore had been observing Deckard's solitary figure. Sensing the significance of the moment, he made his way over with deliberate steps. "Is that a toad, Mr. Deckard?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. "Yes, John, it is," Deckard confirmed, yet he couldn't shake a nagging doubt. Iran, Deckard's wife, approached them, her presence bringing a sense of clarity and concern. She examined the toad with a critical eye. "Rick, this toad, it's artificial," she declared. The truth of her words struck Deckard, challenging his beliefs. He felt a profound sense of disillusionment, realizing the implications for their faith in Mercerism. John's expression turned somber. "I felt something, Mr. Deckard. Holding the spider, connecting with Mercer, it felt real." Deckard met John's gaze, understanding his need for belief. "I know, John. We all wanted to believe. But we must face the reality that our world is filled with illusions." Iran's insight into the toad's artificiality and her support for Deckard's emotional turmoil underscore her role as a compassionate partner, while the toad itself continues to be a symbol of the blurred lines between reality and fabrication. It's a poignant reminder of the delicate balance between hope and the harsh truths of their existence. As they stand together, the trio contemplates the implications of this discovery, pondering the essence of their beliefs and the constructs of their reality. Iran's gentle touch on Deckard's shoulder offers silent comfort, a testament to their enduring bond in the face of disillusionment. Confronting reality. The room was dim, the only light coming from the neon glow of the city outside. Rick Deckard stood still, his gaze meeting Rachel's. She sat quietly, her composure intact despite the situation. "Rick," she said, "there's more to this than what's on the surface." Deckard felt the familiar weight at his side but didn't move. The silence was broken by John Isidore's entrance. "Rick, consider the broader picture," Isidore implored. Deckard looked at him, considering his words. Rachel stood, her outline against the window. "Let me show you something," she offered. Deckard hesitated, then nodded slightly. Footsteps approached and the door swung open to reveal Roy Batty. "We must go," he declared. Rachel extended her hand to Deckard. "See for yourself, Rick." Deckard's decision was immediate. He stepped forward, ready to embrace the unknown. As Deckard moved forward, the room seemed to dissolve around them, replaced by the stark, unyielding landscape of the Nexus 6 reality. The air was charged with a palpable energy, and the city's neon lights flickered like distant stars. Roy led the way, his figure cutting through the uncertainty that shrouded their path. Rachel's grip was firm, her presence a constant as they navigated the unfamiliar terrain. Isidore followed, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. Together they ventured deeper into the heart of what it meant to be truly alive. Decay and redefinition. Deckard held the artificial toad, pondering its authenticity and the broader implications for his reality. Iran, observing him, questioned the significance of the toad's genuineness. Deckard expressed his existential crisis, questioning the nature of reality, his profession, and the value of his beliefs. Iran suggested that Deckard's concern and empathy might be what grants authenticity. Deckard, troubled by the android's apparent emotions, debated his role in retiring them. Iran offered comfort, suggesting that both humans and androids are on a journey of discovery. Deckard, conflicted, contemplated the blurred lines between humans and androids, considering a shift from hunter to seeker of understanding. Iran supported this new path, hinting at a fresh beginning. Deckard, with the toad as a symbol, embraced a new quest for truth. stepping into a future where the divide between human and android may dissolve.